And welcome. I'm Benjamin Watson, a 16-year NFL veteran and NFLPA Executive Committee member. And I want to welcome you to a conversation about race, not only about race, but about race in America and race in sport. I'm excited about what we're going to hear tonight. We've got some great guests that are experts in their field, but are also moving the line forward when it comes to correcting and facing the injustice that we are talking about so often right now. But first, we have a prize, actually a giveaway type of thing that we're doing. I want to make you aware of. And so before we get started with this session, I want to tell you about this opportunity, fantastic opportunity created by the NFLPA, One Team Partners, and the NABJ Sports Task Force. We'll be selecting a young journalist to conduct an interview virtually. Of course, it's virtually now. We can't have anybody touching each other anymore, not during COVID, but virtual interview of a professional athlete. To enter the contest, there'll be a video essay submission to a prompt. We'll select one journalist and provide them the opportunity to virtually interview this athlete and discuss topics ranging from social justice, the role of athletes in activism, race relations in our country, competition, sports, whatever you want to do. So go to the prompt, submit your video, and you could be selected as a young journalist to interview one of your favorite athletes, all about social justice. So make sure you do that. Before we get started, just to kind of set the table, so to speak, and talk about the landscape, there's nothing really in our culture as powerful as sport. And we've all experienced that. We all know throughout the history of our country, sport has been that uniting effect, had that uniting effect that has moved the culture forward, sometimes when it didn't want to. Sports is a lot of times called the great equalizer. But the thing I love about sport in my 16 years, but even just being a sports fan, is the fact that athletes are always at the forefront of change. And athletes are aware, they know what's going on, they pay taxes, they vote, they do all the things that everybody else does. Their mothers, their fathers, their sisters, their brothers, their husbands, their wives, they're all those things that everyone else is, and they care about what's going on around us. And so what excites me really about this time when it comes to athletics is the fact that so many athletes, so many former athletes, so many people involved with sports, period, are involved with the betterment of our nation. So without further ado, I want to introduce our special guests. We have three of them, as I said before. And the first one I want to introduce is Nate Boyer. Now, Nate, many of you may know him. Nate was a player for the Seattle Seahawks. He was also an Army Special Forces veteran. He's a world traveler. He's a philanthropist. He's a community leader. He's kind of like Jack Bauer. He's like the model citizen / Captain America. He actually created an organization called MVP, which helps athletes as well as veterans tackle the transition struggles when they come out of their workspaces. His belief is that anything is possible. And most recently, he hosted an NFL Network show called Indivisible that featured players and community leaders across the nation discussing topics that affect us in our everyday lives. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Nate Boyer. Nate.
Thank you. Hey, first of all, I'm not an expert in any kind of field. You gave me that title, and I played in one game, and you played for 16 years, so little bit different. But thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. Much respect. Our second guest is Roger Mason Jr. And Roger, basketball player. I wish I was a little bit taller. I sure do. I wish I could have played. But he played 12 years in the NBA as well as overseas. He went to University of Virginia, NBA player there. He was the NBPA first vice president, and he also was deputy executive director of the NBPA. He's a forward thinker. Right now, he's currently involved. He's a co-founder and CEO of Vaunt, which is a sports entertainment IP development company. He's also part of NBPA still and Think 450. So, Mr. I wish I was a little bit taller. Roger Mason, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you being with us.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate you guys having me and being with this great group of gals and guys.
Awesome. Last but certainly not least is Miss Cappy Pondexter, another baller. She was born in Chicago and attended John Marshall High School. She was the first basketball player in state history to twice be named Miss Basketball. Twice, 2000 and 2001. And was Gatorade and USA Today Player of the Year. She was the number 2 pick overall by the Phoenix Mercury. She's an all-star, WNBA title holder, and WNBA Finals MVP. Please welcome Ms. Cappie Pondexter. Say hello.
Hi, guys. I have to clarify, though. I am born in Chicago. I was born in California, but raised in Chicago.
Raised in Chicago.
But thank you for having me. Thank you.
Two great places, either way. Well, I thank you all for joining. And to all those who are watching, we thank you for taking the time out of your evening or your early evening, depending on where you are, to join us for this conversation about race beyond the playing field. I want to start off really with just your reactions concerning where we are right now. And I think that if we take ourselves back maybe, several months right now and think about, like, let's just start with what we saw when it came to George Floyd in Minnesota, because that is kind of what propelled us into where we are now. The protests that we've seen, this feeling and this desire for many people across ethnic lines, socioeconomic status to get involved. What impact did his death have on you personally? And Cappie, let's start with you, since I botched where you were from.
Well, honestly, I've been dealing with these issues within my family for several years in Chicago. We know that Chicago is a very violent city, and we know that the police and social justice is slow to respond. And I had a situation where I had a 16-year-old cousin who was the #1 football player as a freshman in the state of Illinois, and he was murdered. And I watched the justice system basically do anything because it was looked at as black on black crime. But regardless, the fight is important. And so when George Floyd video surfaced, it took me 2 days to actually watch it. I responded to social media, I looked at how they were responding, and I couldn't stomach it. It took me a while, but when I actually watched the video, I had concerns. Flashbacks flashed in my head about the police, and I just honestly, it was just time for change. I think that was just the last straw for Americans. No matter if you're black, no matter if you're white, it was just time. And it was unfortunate that he had to sacrifice his life for us to see it virally. But at the end of the day, I think, it's just time for change. And I think we're all having this conversation is important.
Yeah. Nate, you've been known, and you have a reputation, I would say, and I say this respectfully, for being able to bring out the best in everybody and being able to see with clarity both sides or multiple sides of a certain situation. How is the death of George Floyd and everything that's happened afterwards and the unrest that you've seen or heard from your peers, from others, how has that impacted you? How have you been involved with what we've seen and kind of bringing people together?
Yeah, I think, those 8 minutes and 46 seconds not only affected me in a different way than anything I'd seen before that involved police-involved, brutality and essentially murder. And I think a lot, I'm not speaking for the entire white community, but I think a lot of people that look like me that had maybe seen some things either on the internet or on the news or whatever, where they're kind of like, yeah, but there's a lot of yeah buts, what was really going on? What did we not see there that maybe happened? I really haven't met anybody unless they were absolutely, extreme or just trying to start a fight, over the interwebs that has watched that, has seen that, and not just felt disgusted and like it was just such an inhumane thing to watch. And as tragic and sad as it is, I think it was very important for everybody to be able to see that. Even if your eyelids were taped open and you had to watch that horrible thing, it's because it hurts. It hurts to watch. It's painful. It is, it really takes the humanity out of the situation when you look at, I guess when you try to see it through that police officer's eyes, it's almost impossible if you have any amount of sensitivity to try to fathom how that could happen. And then for others to be there and to see it and to not stop it, it's just like, it's scary. You know what I mean? And I'm not even living in that fear because of the way that I look. But just to see that, to know that that happens, to know that that exists, it reminded me of a long time ago before I joined the military. I went over to the Darfur and I did some relief work over there. And, you know, that was in the midst of a genocide. 400,000 people had been murdered. And until I was there to kind of see that, there's no way I could have fathomed that. There's no way I could like wrap my head around it, that is possible to happen, you know, in this century. Same thing with this situation. Like I'm not gonna say I wouldn't have believed it, but it would have been harder to believe, like, unless I saw that. You know, I would have been like, yeah, well, you're telling me that it was like this, but, you know, what did it really look like? But you can't defend it. We can all see what it really looked like. And I think that was a big, obviously a big turning point and a horrible thing that I think was necessary for us to witness.
Yeah, I think kind of what you're pointing to is the word empathy. And that's what we lack a lot of in culture sometimes. Roger, when it comes to empathy and your experience in locker rooms, how has your experience in the locker room when it comes to these types of things been different than your experience now outside of it as a professional in another sphere?
You know, I think the one thing that's beautiful about sports is it has a way of connecting all kinds of people. And so, you know, playing basketball at a young age, you know, when you're really young, you know, and you're hooping, you don't see color. And so in the locker room, the dynamic, you know, your brothers, you know, whether they're white or black or Spanish or whatever it is, like, you know, you're going out to battle and you're hooping together, and you have that empathy, you have that togetherness, you have that brotherhood. And so to see a team environment and then what real life is like, it's two different things. It's the false reality. And you know, I think that, you know, I can remember growing up in DC and knowing that at any point, you know, I could be thrown out of a car and slammed on the ground for no reason. And, you know, my teammate lives a completely different life. And so, you know, I think as a unifier, sports does that, but it shows a vast contrast between, you know, how evil this world, you know, can be, you know, at times. And I think it was a perfect storm with what happened with George Floyd. You know, we're in the middle of quarantine, COVID, people are home. I don't think it was an accident. I think there's purpose behind the fact that, you know, we had time to pay attention. And even for a lot of people in our community, just to see the look on the officer's face and the lack of humanity, you know, that's the thing. You know, you talk about the locker room and sportsmanship and all these great characteristics that we learn from playing basketball and playing sports. And then to see how that doesn't translate in real life with real humanity and someone's life. I mean, the guy called for his mom. So, you know, to answer your question, I mean, when I look at the locker room and you know, how we've been trained as athletes and how, you know, we compete, but at the end of the day, you know, we're all humans, we're all brothers and sisters. And at the end of the day, you know, we after the game, that's it. But to see the game of life play out this way and see how far we still have to go, you know, it was eye-opening, you know, to see that video and to see, you know, what's been going on given, you know, the time at home that everyone's had.
Yeah. So, Cappy, you said that this sort of violence has struck you personally. And so what are some of your frustrations, I guess, when it comes to this conversation nationally? What are some of your frustrations with how it's being framed on a national level?
I mean, it's a lack of uneducated people with educated people. So it's almost like, it's like we have to reinvent the wheel. And it's unfortunate because it's like it shouldn't be that way, but it is what it is. We are in this position right now because for like like Roger said, it's not by mistake. It's all by design. So for me, I'm just trying to create the narrative that's positive for people. You know what I mean? Because like I'm a very spiritual person. I don't think that it's about black or white. It's about one race. And I know that I personally can't do it alone. And I know I need my brothers and sisters, no matter what color you are, what origin you're from. And, I'm just a voice of change. I want to see change because I know it's necessary. And because it's about the kids, it's about the youth. It's not even about us anymore. But we're so caught up egotistically that we make it about ourselves. And I think the most important thing is the education part. Like, how do we educate? How do we inform people? And, it's people like us on today that will make the difference.
Yeah. Nate, I see the two American flags in the background behind you. I definitely know what country you're in. This is obviously an election year, and a lot is said about patriotism and what that means and what that doesn't mean. Like I said before, I really value your opinion being someone who has served our country in that capacity. What is our biggest hang up when it comes to getting this race thing right off the field?
Well, I think, real quickly, the tough thing, the frustrating thing for me from a political standpoint is just everything, and it's spilled over into our country. Everything has become so binary, and it's like, you got to be, it's like, we've done such a terrible job of labeling one another, first of all, but then like, we've got these, these two boxes basically, and you got to believe everything in this box or everything in this box. And you can't, it's hard, it's hard to have your own feelings and opinions and emotions about things. And, those symbols, those flags are very special to me. And a lot of that's because of my time in service, of course, but also, being overseas and seeing how for a lot of people that don't have nearly what we have here, it is a beacon of hope, right? And I understand that there's things that they don't understand about the complication of how America was built in a lot of ways, and who built it and who didn't get credit, or it was built sort of at their mercy in some way. But I also believe that most of us in this country do have a sense of pride of what we have, and do understand that, the freedoms that are supposed to be available to all are not completely yet, but there's a lot of people working towards that. It's not this place that I think it's possible to get there is what I'm trying to get at. So for me, it's also a beacon of hope, and what I want to strive for, because to me, we are, or at least have the capacity to be, the greatest country in the world, do the most good. And we are very charitable. We've got all these things that we do well. And then we've got all these things that we really need to work on. And it's frustrating for me to see, to see a lot of people that feel like just okay is good enough. You know what I mean? Or like, well, we're not as bad as so-and-so or this, or, at least we're not that. And so like, yeah, but like, that's my yeah, but like, yeah, but you're okay with that. With you talk about like American exceptionalism, but you don't want to work towards it. You don't want to strive towards it. You don't want to think about that and accept that your feelings and emotions are just based on your experiences, and you can only know what it's like to be you, just like I can only know what it's like to be me. And if I don't, as you said, alluded to it and talked about empathy, if I don't at least try to have empathy and listen and really understand, and maybe make some sort of comparison in my life. I mean, I'll never know what it's like to be a person of color. But at least, I know what it's like to be stereotyped because I was in the military, and people assume certain things about me because, I wore camouflage and went overseas. So there's a certain group of people that think, I'm just a death machine, and like, that's all I'm about. And it's like, that's not what I'm all about. And I know it's the same way with athletes, people see that uniform, oh, you're a football player. So like, you're a dumb jock. This is all you know. You're super wealthy. You got no, you should have no complaints. You know, you're not, basically they dehumanize you right out the gate because of something you do. So I do understand those things. And all I can do is try to continue to educate myself and really, really, truly listen without just waiting for my turn to like prove my point, you know, and be so obsessed with being right all the time. And that's something that I struggle with because I'm a prideful person and I have an ego and I have all those things like, but it's something that I'm slowly learning to let go of. And over the last 4 years, I think I've grown a lot in that regard. But I still got a long way to go myself.
So what is, in your opinion, the role of the athlete specifically right now, right here, right now, in this time, on this day? What is the role of the athlete? Because you mentioned, you know, trying to make, we don't accept mediocrity in any other realm, right? As athletes in business, we don't accept mediocrity. But to your point, when it comes to the country and making the country better, what is the role of the athlete in making the country the best country in the world, which it is, but we want it to be better?
There's a huge role there. And it's like people expect athletes to carry themselves a certain way on the field. And it's interesting how that varies between men and women as well. You know, there's like male athlete acts this way, women athlete acts this way. And, you know, all that's kind of ridiculous too. But it's like they expect you to carry yourself a certain way off the field, on the field, do these things, do those things. But you can't do these things. You can't be outspoken. You can't have opinions. You know, they basically, they act like they think you are, in a sense, a member of the military that took an oath and you're just going to follow orders or something. And even in that regard, military members, like we are as diverse as they come. We have a million different opinions and feelings and emotions and experiences. We don't all think the same just because we wear that same uniform. And it's incredibly important for athletes to continue to not only speak out, but to continue to take action because people listen to them and they follow them and they respect them. I mean, those are, when we're young, at least for me, when I was young growing up, all my heroes were athletes, all of them, you know, and except for maybe my parents. And it was like, I just looked up to those guys. I was a big 49er fan growing up in the Bay Area. So it was like Joe Montana and Jerry Rice and Roger Craig and Ronnie Lott. And like, I mean, I worship those guys. And, you know, if I ever got to meet them or hear them speak, it always just, it made me feel really, I guess, justified in my, in my praise for them when they did stuff in the community, when they were involved in like making this country better, even if they were taking a bit of a risk. And even if it's things that I maybe as I grew older, don't completely agree with, if they're going about it in a positive, professional, peaceful way, and they're embracing others and they're willing to listen too, there's no better person in this country to lead us. Because to me, I don't want to make this a huge political discussion, but you know, a lot of politicians, it's hard for me to really listen to. I just think that there's so much, and that goes for both parties. It gets really hard for me to believe, you know. But with athletes, because they're not trying to get reelected, you know. For them, it's the opposite. Like if you shut your mouth and don't do anything, you got a better chance of staying in there. But if you're going to be outspoken, you're risking your livelihood. So that person is probably being pretty transparent about who they are. And I respect that a lot more. So I think it's absolutely important, especially for young people. I'm all for it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think some of my frustration is just that it seems, and you know, we're football guys, y'all are basketball, but it seems that basketball has kind of taken the lead when it comes to the acceptance, at least, and the empowering of players to engage in non-sports social issues. I mean, even in this time period right now, we've seen basketball players who have led protests, and it goes back much further than this year. But it always seems like, you know, as football players, many times, you know, we're doing the same things, obviously, but it seems in recent years that basketball has kind of taken off and there's more of an acceptance in their fan base, but also in their organizations for that type of activism. You know, this question is for the basketball folks on the panel, but has that been intentional in your experience? Like, kind of take me back a couple of years, or kind of to the history of basketball, and why do you think you know, so many basketball players, male and female, are usually at the forefront when it comes to sports activism?
Well, I think that I think overall, if you look at the NBA, they've done a really good job of understanding that it's a players' league and that fans are there to see the players. And so I think that approach, just from David Stern, even through Adam Silver, I think overall that's a general case. But if I went to a moment, I think when the Donald Sterling situation happened with that owner, and the players made a stand, the league made a stand. I think that was, you know, with the age of social media, that was probably the first really big moment where, you know, the players were outspoken and the league backed them, right? And I think the fact that, you know, not only did the players have the guts to stand up for something bigger than themselves, but, you know, the league supported that and got that team owner out of the NBA. And I think that was a real, you know, tipping point. You know, that was Adam Silver's first kind of moment as commissioner. But, you know, in an age of social media where guys are much bigger brands, they don't need the media to speak for them. We don't need to have an interview to get a point out on Instagram or Twitter or what have you. So it's a different day. And I think guys realize that their brand is powerful enough to really make a difference themselves without having some words interpreted for them. So I just think the times have changed. I think players are a lot more informative in as far as knowing, you know, the history. And I look at the young guys in our league now that have led protests that are, I mean, it's just a different generation of player. But certainly technology has helped that, as well as, you know, good vets that have kind of helped pave the way. So I think those are some of the reasons.
I mean, for the WNBA, obviously, like, women have been fighting for equality for a long period of time. You can think back from like Title IX. So it's been a fight for us easily, I think, because it's just something we've been doing since the beginning. We've been trying to create a league, and obviously the WNBA has been around for 25 years now. And it's because players have been fighting just for us to have a league. And so we understand when it comes to fighting for justice. You know, obviously, like the NBA, they support us wholeheartedly. And with the passing of Kobe, you know, Kobe has started something that we can't even understand. But at the end of the day, I think it's just important for us to continue to connect with each other, because we know that we're not better without the NBA or vice versa. So I think it's just, you know, it's a day-to-day battle for us, you know, especially as women.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of lean into that a little bit more. Specifically, as a woman, what's the conversation in the locker rooms? Because I'm clearly not in the women's locker room, but what is the conversation when it comes to issues that have to do with racial injustice? Because I believe that, you know, it's kind of a double whammy. It's like you've got the race thing going on, that sort of injustice, but then, oh, by the way, as you mentioned before, there's the sex thing part of it, you know, being a female, having to deal with that on top of the race thing. How do you navigate that? What are some of those conversations like with the women in the NBA and the locker rooms you've been in?
It's pretty easy, you know, because everybody's a professional athlete. You know what I mean? We all come from different backgrounds. We understand that we're all different, but basketball unites us. You know, it's like a sisterhood. It's like a brotherhood. So, like, those are like the least of our worries, you know, and if anybody has to complain or go to thing, they go through HR. It's never been about like, oh, let's have these conversations in the locker room. I mean, from my experience, I've never experienced that. But I can say we do talk about topics that are important, you know, like Black Lives Matters. You know, Minnesota was a league team that took the front stand for us when it came to that, when it came to police brutality in Minnesota. And when they left the arena because they were playing a national anthem. So it's a bunch of things that I know that we stand for and we do fight for. But at the end of the day, sports is camaraderie. It brings us together. It's like we really don't have time to really think about those things at the end of the day. You know, sports is a very special thing. You know, it's that one thing that we do have that is important. But at the same time, I'm happy that we're now all using our platforms to really talk about all these injustices that we all face day to day, no matter if we're on the court or off the court. you know, no matter if we're white or black, like we all face these things. So I think it's just cool to see that we're all talking about it at the same time.
Nate, I think, you know, with the MVP, with the program that you started, I want you to talk a little bit about that, and specifically when it comes to athletes transitioning. And, you know, it's one thing to be in the locker room and to have that certain platform that you have because the media is coming in there every day. They have a microphone in your face because you're a professional athlete. And so you get an opportunity to hold press conferences and to talk about these issues from a broad platform. What's been your experience, or how has the MVP program that you co-founded, how have you overlapped with these issues or maybe helped guys that are transitioning to get involved?
Yeah, that's been something we've made a conscious effort, I think, through the last 3 or 4 months because of everything going on. Or I guess maybe even a hair less than that. But because initially this idea of focusing on combat vets and former professional athletes who lose that identity in a sense with the uniform when it comes off, right, and often lose that purpose and the structure and the team, the camaraderie, all those things that you've been accustomed to since many of us were very young. And, you've got that structure where you get up at a certain time, you eat certain things, take care of yourself, you do treatment, you go to practice, you hit the weight room. And then when that's all done, it's like, okay, who am I now? What do I do? Those same things happen in the military service, and I sort of transitioned twice because of that. And actually the tougher one for me was away from sports, because at least when I left the military, I went into college and I was an older college student, but I still had that brotherhood in that locker room and, practice every day to look forward to. If I was having a bad day, I go out there on the field and I sort of release that stuff and kind of let it go. And then I've got people I can talk to about stuff and something to focus on. And so we really focused initially with MVP on, let's stay away from politics. Let's stay away from these conversations because we just want to focus on the warrior within and building each other up from the inside out. And we didn't want to, and you got to walk a tightrope a bit with a nonprofit, and be careful with, depending on what your nonprofit is all about, because you got to walk on eggshells in a sense, and you don't want to upset people. But over the last few months, things have changed a bit for us, even, and it's like we got to this place where not only were we hearing some pretty powerful and important stuff from our female veterans and athletes that were like, and we get a lot of them that join our program and come, but there still was certain things they felt uncomfortable talking about and sharing, things that were said that they felt like, maybe people should think a little harder before they say things. And then we started talking about, like, how can we smartly have these conversations? We have such a diverse group. Like, why wouldn't we? You know what I mean? As long as this wasn't a place where we're bringing people in to just sort of grandstand and kind of throw all their opinions on somebody and try to change somebody's mind. Like, that's not what we're doing. But a lot of us in this time are very frustrated and very hurt, and they need to let that stuff out. And we want to be there for one another for that release. We wrap our arms around one another, and we encourage vulnerability. We encourage that pure transparency. If you're going through something tough, share it and let it out. And it wasn't fair to us to say, you could do that, but as long as it follows these rules, you know what I mean? And so we shifted, we adjusted, which I'm very proud of, because we're always changing and we're growing, you know what I mean? So that's been really special to be a part of and just to learn ourselves. And there's a lot of veterans in our group that feel very strongly about those symbols. And it, almost no matter what you say, it's like, to them, for a long time, it really hurt them and offended them in some ways to see someone not stand for the anthem, or to see someone, say that things are not equal in our country, because they fought for that country and they have, pride in that. But the more that they've listened and learned and kind of swallowed a big pill of pride, to hear them shift a little bit in the way in the things that they say, and the conversations that they're being willing to have now, even if they're still a pretty conservative person, that's really cool to see, because that's what it's all about for me. Like, if you're a conservative, if you're a conservative person, you got conservative values, there's nothing wrong with that. What's important to me is that you have open-minded values. You can be open-minded and patriotic at the same time. I think you should be. You should love your country and do what you can to make it better. But you should also understand that when it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing, it's not operating in a proper manner, and people aren't being held accountable and they're doing wrong. You fix that, because you do that in every other facet of your life. Why would you not do that with the country as a whole?
Exactly. Yeah. Along those lines, what advice would you give for an athlete that is on the other side of the flag debate? Maybe that athlete does kneel for the flag or raise a fist during the flag during the national anthem. What advice would you give for that athlete as they speak publicly about their stance, in the hopes of bridging the gap to those who you just spoke about, who have very, very strong feelings about the fact that everyone at all times should stand and salute the flag? What advice would you give for them?
I mean, all I could say is, no matter what, there's going to be a portion of the populace that will never accept what you're doing. And you just got to let that go, because that's tough. It's hard. It's hard to receive hate. No matter how tough you are, you feel something. You know what I mean? It's at least with me, I can't just shrug it all off. It does affect me. But you got to maintain that focus on the positive things that you're saying and what you're doing, and how many people agree with what you're all about. And I think it's important to communicate if you feel this way. If you feel like it's important to say, look, this has that I love this country. I support this country and what it could be. But that doesn't mean I support every little thing that's going on. And if things are broken within my own life, within my family's life, what do? Like, I discipline a child. You know what I mean? I tell my friend, like, brother, you're doing wrong right now. You got to fix that. And I tell myself those same things. So that should be the same with the country. Like, you can feel those things. You can take a knee, and it doesn't mean that you think all cops are bad and we should just tear everything down and start over. You can also stand for the flag, and that doesn't mean you don't believe Black Lives Matter. You know what I mean? You can do both those things. And I think just continuing to say it as mind-numbingly repetitive as it may be, I think that's key. Sorry, I got a call. A call started to come in.
Thanks. Anyway, thanks. Everything you just said was on point, and so I definitely appreciate you for saying that. I think there needs to be some nuance and some complexity in all of our points of views, and allow for other points of view while still holding fast to our own convictions. I just want to thank everybody who's watching, and also remind you that if you have a question, put it in the chat over here. We want to get to some of your questions as well. Matter of fact, I'm gonna get one right now. This is about guaranteed contracts. I think this question kind of came in, Cappy and Roger, when we were talking about the fact that in basketball there seems to be more openness when it comes to activism from players, speaking out about the issues of our day. And the question says, do you think having guaranteed contracts in basketball play a factor in that, I guess, the willingness to speak out, or is it more because of the leadership and ownership in the NBA?
I would say, people are human. And at the end of the day, if you've got guaranteed $30, $40, $50 million, and you have a good sense that you've got your security, I'm sure the natural instinct is for you to have a little bit more comfort. Football players don't have guaranteed contracts, but y'all still get paid a lot of money. I think the difference is, you guys, for so long you have helmets, and it didn't seem like in the NFL you were encouraged to really show that individualism, and it's more about the team and the shield, where basketball's, it's a little bit more about the individual player brand. But certainly having that security makes a difference. But at the same time, you look at somebody like LeBron James, who's got all these endorsements and all these brands that he's a part of. And, he started speaking out before it was, really cool. He had security, but he also had a lot to lose. And I think at the end of the day, I don't take it for granted that that these guys are still, making a stand and standing for what they believe in is right. But to answer your question, it doesn't hurt to have a guaranteed contract for sure.
You want to add anything?
I mean, I would have to agree. Obviously our pay cut budget is a little different than NFL, NBA, but I mean, we've been doing a fight for a long period of time because, like I said, it goes back to inequality and for us fighting for something. So we feel like we don't have much to lose because we don't make a lot of money, and so we don't mind being that voice. We don't mind making it. To be the first to make the change. And we've seen it through history. We know it. It's been talked about in the social media. But the thing is we're all having this important conversation. And to go back to what Roger said, obviously having a guaranteed contract it's comfortable because at the end of the day that money is guaranteed, but you can still make your point and have your voice. And a lot of times we are silenced, as athletes. But, I think it's just important now that during these times, we speak up because we have the opportunity and we have the moment. And it's nothing more important than the moment, and we're all in this moment together right now.
Yeah, I think that some people would say, well, you guys got money, so of course you speak out, but I have to believe that there has to be something in the individual before they had money, so to speak, or had the guaranteed contract to even be interested or want to advocate in this way. You don't just wake up one day and want to do some of these things, although, there is an education process that happens. I mean, we know I've played with different players who had no idea about the things that were going on until they had a personal connection with me or someone else, and then those things became important to them. So, I do think it's a bit of a combination of both. Specifically talking about youth, though. So as athletes, Nate, you talked about it, the fact that when you were growing up in the Bay Area, I was growing up on the other side of the country, and Jerry Rice was still my favorite player, and Joe Montana. I think that was like across the nation. But growing up there, you said you looked up to those folks. And so I got a question coming in here for you, Cappy, kind of about young people. And it says, what role does education play in equality, and how can athletes use their influence and accomplishments to set a foundation for younger people, kind of like how you mentioned before? So how can we as athletes, how can athletes who are watching this or may watch it later, how can they help to kind of set that foundation and encourage this type of education for younger people coming along?
I mean, I think it's important because, although we work really hard off the court to accomplish everything that we've ever accomplished in sports, we have the opportunity to go to school. And a lot of us don't take advantage of that. And so I think it's important now that we stress the importance of education. If you have the opportunity to get a free scholarship at a major university, why not take advantage of everything that's available? Like for me, I went to Rutgers University. It's a fine school. And it's one of the best. And some people even think it's Ivy League. And so for me, I still have my books from school, so I'm able to still educate myself every single day because I took advantage of the education system that I was afforded because I played basketball. And so when you have the opportunity to do that, I think we just, as leaders, we have to continue to push the youth and say okay, yeah, you're going to play basketball to make money. I get it. But at the end of the day, you have an opportunity to get an education as well. And if we continue to stress the importance of education as leaders of the new generation, I think that we can make a change. And for me, if you look at my social media, I'm always educating because I just think it's important, because I'm not a political person. This is the first time that I've actually really sat down and listened to every party that's available for us to understand and vote for. So I'm okay, every single day I'm educating myself. I'm not just going to decide on who I'm going to vote for because somebody else says it that's in a higher position or higher power. No, I want to know history. I want to know who's funding what. I want to know every single thing because I'm educating myself, and it's very important. And so I can't stress it enough how important it is.
I would, I want to add something too, because I think it was such an important point that you made earlier, Cappy. But when you talk about systemic racism, and you think about, I grew up in D.C. I was fortunate. I went to a great school. My mom and my dad, they wanted to really make sure I was in a great private school. But a lot of the people I grew up with, because of where they lived, they weren't afforded the same education that I was. And a lot of athletes, most of us, we come from areas that don't necessarily have the best education, if you're talking about the public school. And so when you talk about systemic racism and the differences between, some of the counties where the taxes are really high and the schools offer more AP classes and offer a lot of things that a lot of kids in lower income houses don't have. And so as athletes, I think this is a generation that's understanding that change really starts with our youth. Change starts with the education system, at an early age. By the time, you're, 19, 20, 21, it's too late. And so I think as athletes, we have an opportunity in our own communities after we've now made it to affect that change and to pour into our education systems and to pour into our communities to help our youth educate themselves at an early age. Because a lot of us have come out of some really tough situations, but there's so many kids that don't get the same opportunities that basketball has given us. And so I think that that's a really big, opportunity that athletes have now, is to really do that at a local level.
On that local level, and I know you are involved with securing investments, and for lack of a better term, I'll say you're in the finance arena, so to speak. On a granular level and a practical level, what has that looked like for you investing in youth, and what advice would you give to other athletes who want to get involved but don't quite know how to do it? Uh-oh, did we lose Roger? I think
I'll
we lost
answer
Roger.
for him.
You
No,
go ahead.
I'm kidding.
Well, we'll go ahead and pivot, because I did want to ask you, Nate, however, about the youth as well, because, I grew up in, we were talking about looking up to people, and I grew up in Norfolk, Virginia, which is Navy town. And so while my immediate family wasn't in the military, there were others that were. And so while I had athletes that were my heroes, of course, I also saw and greatly respected those who were involved in the armed forces. And I can remember being a kid and taking field trips to aircraft carriers and those sorts of things. And I had classmates who had, family members who were gone over on Desert Storm, that sort of thing. And so being around all that, I garnered kind of a great respect. So what would be your message to you specifically, to the young people who may be watching, and the young people that you run into, and the young people that look up to people like yourself, to like everybody on this panel, specifically when it comes to addressing and being aware of injustice, the discovery that needs to happen? What's your hope for them? Like, what would be your charge? Like, we're in the locker room right now, and we're gonna bust out of this locker room and go tackle this thing. What's your speech to them?
Yeah, well, I think something that I never would have really thought of at a young age, and maybe growing up in the Bay Area helped. I mean, I grew up in a place that was pretty mixed, pretty diverse. But I also lived in different parts of the Bay Area. So I lived in a part that was predominantly, or at least much more people of color. And then I grew up later when I was like in high school in white suburbia, So it's just very different things. But I think across the board for everybody that's young is to we encourage having uncomfortable conversations. I don't know if I love the word uncomfortable so much as courageous conversations these days, right? We're encouraging that, let go of what preconceived notions that you have for some amount of time, and understand that you're a product of, for the most part, of your environment and how you feel and how you believe. And I think for young people to understand that, because children that are very, very young, they naturally have that. They haven't they haven't developed bias so much. I mean, it's our fault. You know, we put that in them with how society operates, what's on TV, what the parents are talking about. You know, it's thrust upon them. And so, you know, I think that would be the number one thing for young people. Just, you know, get to know the brother and sister in your locker room that you don't know about. You've got your friends, you've got your little group, right? When you go out on the field and play, you're playing with everybody on that team. You know, when you go out, that's the cool thing about almost every sport, but especially for me for football, just the way that logistically you're literally shoulder to shoulder, side by side with 10 other people, and you're going against this other team who, in the moment for those 3 hours, yeah, they're the bad guys, but afterwards it's all good. And you have to trust those people. You have to communicate out there. You've got to, you know, maybe off the field, you don't necessarily jive with this guy, but if you want to win, you got to put that stuff aside and work together. And that's a great message and lesson just for the country as a whole that a lot of older people don't do, you know. And I think that young people can be leaders as well, not just for other young people, for adults, you know, and watch a group of young people you put together from all walks of life. And if you give them a mission, you know, like go win this game, go figure it out, and they're passionate about the game that they're playing or whatever, they will do that. And so I think it would just be to be brave. And being brave doesn't mean being tough and strong all the time. Sometimes it means shutting up and listening. Sometimes it means admitting you made a mistake and you were wrong and you don't have all the answers. And just be a good person. You know, that's something Michael Bennett used to always say, and he's the goofiest dude in the league. But he always says that, man. He just said, just be a good person. Just be a good person. That's it. And it's so simple, it's genius. But that's it. And I think I'm inspired by young people all the time. You know, I got a young niece and nephew that are awesome, and I get to meet a lot of them. I don't have kids myself, but I get to meet a lot of my friends' kids, and it's really inspiring and really hopeful. You know, they're not all just sitting around playing video games all day. There's nothing totally wrong with that, but a lot of them they do quite a bit, and they're leaders, and I feel like we're in good hands.
Roger, we lost you for a minute, but I'm glad you're back. And the question I was going to ask you was kind of, I guess, asking you to kind of unpack what you were talking about investment. And you know, we're living in a time where still in 2020, the average white family's net worth is 10 times that of the average black family. Here in Boston, Massachusetts, where I live, the average net worth of a black person is $8. And we know that that's not because of lack of desire or lack of effort. We can go through a litany of policies that have happened over the course of the last century that have affected the ability of upward mobility for a certain populace of our population, a certain part of our population. And so you talked about investing, and I know you're involved with investments and in finance. So from a practical level, if I'm an athlete or anybody else listening, and I want to invest, I want to, you know, address some of these issues like you talked about from a financial standpoint, where are some ways that I can donate, raise money, plug in? How have you done that personally and with the firm that you work with?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and the inequalities are very clear. I think first and foremost, outside of any capital that a player has, because at the end of the day, our playing career is a small window. And so many times people look at athletes and expect them to pour back finances into their community when at the end of the day, you know, not everybody's making $100 million, right? So we know financial literacy is a big thing in sports, and so we want to be smart. With that said, I think the biggest, you know, voice we have, the biggest impact is our brand and ourselves. So you figure most athletes have some endorsements. They have some brands that are a part of it. And right now, there's so many conversations about people asking how they can help. I think athletes can leverage the brand equity they have. They can leverage the fact that they're you know, well-known and famous. They can leverage the fact that kids look up to them. So it doesn't necessarily always have to necessarily be about how much money they're investing. It could be maybe the team that's making hundreds of millions of dollars. And and there's a way to go back to that player's community and impact it in other ways. So, you know, I think that foundations are great, and I think players are doing a great job of putting money in. You look at what Kyrie Irving's done. Oh my Lord, like he's just doing a great job, and that's just unbelievable. But not everybody has a checkbook that Kyrie has, and so I think there's so many other ways that athletes can still impact communities and impact those statistics that you're talking about. Because at the end of the day, you know, it's got to start at the education level. It has to, if we're going to really see changes. And so I could go on and on about this. You see, I perk up because I just feel like there's a lot of opportunity right now for athletes to make a big difference with the inequalities in the education system. And I'm actually working on some things myself to do so.
Well, please keep us posted. I know those that are watching will be interested. I actually see a question right here talking about the emphasis on youth and what are specific changes that are needed in how we educate our children. And so you talked about that. We talked about resources. There's actually a curriculum that's coming out hopefully at the end of this year. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's called Black History 365. And with the emphasis on educating in totality, our history as Americans, this is American history, and we're learning new things every day. A group of people have gotten together, educators, historians have gotten together and created a 365 curriculum that's going to be K1 through 12. It's going to be coming out pretty soon here. I think it's actually going to be implemented in some districts in around Dallas, Texas. But I've got to see some of it, and my mind was blown by some of this history that goes all the way back to ancient Africa. So when we're talking about appreciating people for who they are, I think understanding their history, our history, what kind of brought us all here to this country together where we are now will help us move forward. So we're at 8 o'clock. We're going to wrap up. Got one last question. This was going to go to Cappy. Want you to close us out. And the question is, what does change really look like? How will we know when we've arrived? We talk about it all the time. We need this change. Things got to get better. We hate where we are right now. But have you ever sat back and thought, okay, I don't know we've made it collectively as a nation when this happens? What does that look like to you?
It's a process, and I think we all should respect that process right now. I think it's more healing than anything. It's traumatic stuff that we all have been faced with, no matter what color we are, that we have to deal with. We know that this country has been dealing with slavery and reparations for 400 plus years. So to unwind all of that, to see where we are right now, we see everybody that fought for everything that we're talking about. I think it's going to take time, and we have to be gentle with each other. We have to be understanding. We have to listen more. We do need allies, no matter what color it is that we're talking about. And I do believe in change. I believe in hope. I believe that we can see a difference before it's all over and done with. And I think us as sports leaders, we have the opportunity to kind of set the bar because we are looked at as leaders. And I think the most important thing is just having these uncomfortable conversations or courageous conversations and embracing it all, because it's easy to not like somebody because of how they look or where they come from. But I think the most loving thing is just to spread love, because that's easy to do. That's the greatest gift that we all have. And I think it's the most important thing that we can give right now to each other, because with COVID and Black Lives Matter, it's a lot for us emotionally, physically, spiritually. It's a lot. But I think if we all connect with each other and understand each other a little bit more and have these uncomfortable conversations to move the culture forward and move Americans forward, I think change can happen. And it starts with education. That's the number one thing, educating ourselves. And then we move forward. And I think it can happen.
Love, uncomfortable and courageous conversations. I love that, which is what we had right now. So I want to thank each one of you for taking your time out of your evening to share your heart in a courageous and honest way. I think that is the first step. Like everybody said, we have to be willing to enter into these courageous conversations. We need to be willing to love people, and we need to be willing to really sacrifice maybe some of our own pride and our own desires for a learning process. If we really care about one another, we really care about where we're going in the locker room, but also outside the locker room. So, Cabby, Nate, Roger, I appreciate your time. Thank you. I want to thank everybody who tuned in to watch. I want to thank you, everybody who tuned in to watch. And also I want to thank NFLPA, as I mentioned before in the beginning, One Team Partners for their contribution. I want to thank NABJ, Sports Task Force Scholarship Fund, which I just wanted to give you a reminder to log on so that you can win the prize to be the Young Sports Journalist. And also, I just want to, I guess, pay homage to those who have passed. I mean, the reason why we're here is because of what we've seen happen in the streets. The reason why we're here is because of things that have happened to us personally, as we heard earlier. And the reason why we're here is because we all want things to be better. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to the Sports Task Force Chair, Sherrod Blakely, and he has some final thoughts for us. Sherrod.
Yes. Thank you, Ben, so much. First of all, thank you all for being part of this. This was great. I think there was a lot of food for thought for many people. I know I'm full. I can't speak for the rest, but I know I am full. I want to thank Ben Watson for leading the charge here, Cappy Pondexter, Roger Mason Jr., Nate Boyer. You guys are great. And just picking up what Ben talked about, again, special shout out to NFLPA, specifically Carl Francis and Brandon Parker for their contributions and really helping put this together. And One Team Partners, Elliot Mack and his team, great job. Looking forward to a long and fruitful, mutually beneficial partnership with them and the NABJ Sports Task Force. And again, thank you all for taking the time out to listen to what was an incredibly good, amazingly awesome discussion here. And that being said, we're going to have additional programming throughout the fall, Sports Task Force related, and this particular session will be available on our NABJ Sports Task Force YouTube channel. So check that out in the very near future. And with that being said, thank you all for checking us out. Good night. Thank you so much.
Good job.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate y'all having us. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you, man. Good to see you. Good to see you, Cabby.
All right, nice to
Make
meet
sure you
everyone.
make sure you tell Kara I said hey.
I am. I promise. I'm about to get on right now and talk to her.
I used to literally jump on her back and she would carry me.